The winter ball at Ashford House glittered with chandeliers and polished marble, but beneath its grandeur lay a current of whispers sharp enough to cut. The Duke of Ashford moved among his guests with practiced dignity, though every step felt heavier than the last. It had been 2 years since his divorce from Lady Eleanor, yet the court still traded her name, like a morsel of intrigue. Their hushed remarks floated through the perfumed air, pricking his composure like thorns. He tried not to hear any of it, but her memory, persistent, delicate, and painful, shadowed him like a second presence. He paused near a column wrapped in winter roses, watching dancers glide across the floor. Their elegance only deepened the ache twisting inside him. Beside him appeared his sister, Lady Charlotte, bright-eyed and determined to jolt him from his brooding. She pressed a glass into his hand. "Drink," she murmured, "before you turn to stone entirely." "I am contemplating," he replied. "You are drowning in regret," she corrected softly. "And they all see it." He did not answer. What good were words when the truth lived so plainly on his face? Charlotte followed his gaze, then sighed. "They are talking about her again. They always will." Charlotte touched his arm, her expression tender. "You loved her more than you admitted, perhaps more than you understood." He looked away, unwilling to let grief find shape. But the ballroom shifted then, a ripple, a hush, spreading from the entrance like a tide pulling back. The doors opened. Conversation stilled. Even the music faltered. She stood there. Lady Eleanor. The sight of her struck him like a blow. She entered with quiet resolve, her violet gown catching the golden light. Her posture held dignity, yet a faint tremor shadowed her composure. Her eyes swept the room, not seeking admiration, but bracing against judgment she knew was coming. And then he saw it, the curve beneath the velvet. A gentle, unmistakable swell. Pregnant. The room reacted instantly. A dropped fan, a sharp intake of breath, murmured accusations rising like smoke. Someone whispered that she must have found comfort elsewhere. Another wondered if she had returned for coin. Eleanor heard every cruel syllable. Her shoulders tightened barely, but her chin remained high. The Duke could not breathe. The memory of their last night together rushed back with piercing clarity. He had not known. She had vanished before truth could find him. He stepped forward without meaning to. Charlotte gasped softly, but did not stop him. All eyes snapped to him as he crossed the marble floor. Eleanor paused at the foot of the staircase. The candlelight caught the faint sheen of fatigue around her eyes, the quiet strain in her breath. She placed a hand at her side, instinctive, protective, and something in him fractured. He reached her. They stood face to face, the world shrinking to the fragile space between them. "Eleanor," he said, the name leaving him like a confession. Her expression flickered, though she held firm. "Your Grace." Formality. She used it like armor. He swallowed. "May we speak privately?" Before she could answer, 3 nobles drifted past, their voices razor-sharp, bold, returning in such a state. Shameless. Perhaps she hopes for sympathy. Eleanor stiffened. The Duke turned, anger simmering beneath his restraint, but she spoke first, her voice low and steady. "Do not trouble yourself. Their words cannot wound me more than the past already has." "That is not true," he murmured. Her gaze wavered. "I did not come to reopen old wounds. I came to stand without shame." "You should never have known shame," he said, and the sincerity in his voice startled them both. She looked away, guarding herself from the tremor of emotion threatening to surface. Silence pressed around them. Even the orchestra hesitated, bowstrings suspended. He stepped up one stair, bringing them closer. Eleanor is the child. Her breath caught, barely perceptible. The great doors slammed shut from a sudden draft. The echo rippled through the hall. Eleanor's hand flew to her stomach, instinctive, protective, terrified of some unseen harm. And in that single movement, the truth struck him with absolute clarity. The child was his, not through logic, but through the raw, fragile urgency in her eyes, the way she shielded the life within her, the way fear and longing tangled in her breath as she stood before him. He whispered, voice hoarse, "Why did you not tell me?" She parted her lips, the beginning of an answer trembling on her tongue. But before she could speak, a hesitant chord from the orchestra broke the stillness, and several guests drifted nearer, drawn by the simmering scandal. Eleanor's gaze flicked toward them, fear tightening her breath, then returned to him with a quiet plea he had not seen in years. He softened his voice. "You owe them nothing." "I owe the truth to my child," she whispered, "but I feared its cost." "What cost could outweigh this?" he asked, glancing at her rounded form with unexpected tenderness. She exhaled shakily. "Your world was not kind to me. I thought disappearing would protect us both. You should never have faced us alone." A clatter from the gallery startled her, and she instinctively shielded her stomach. He reached toward her, stopping just short of touching her arm. The restraint struck deeper than contact. "You are trembling," he murmured. "I am carrying more than a child," she said. "I carry years of judgment and the fear of breaking beneath it. You are stronger than any of them." Her eyes shimmered. Strength has its limits. The candles flickered, gilding her face with fragile light. Something in her expression softened. "Will you let me help you?" he asked. "Ask me again," she whispered, "after I tell you everything." She drew a breath, the ballroom leaning in, waiting for the truth she had kept buried for 2 long years. The Duke guided Eleanor toward a quieter corridor, away from the suffocating ring of nobles whose curiosity swelled with every passing second. Despite the whispering tide at their backs, she walked with a measured grace, her hand lightly resting against the curve of her stomach. He kept a respectful distance, though every instinct urged him to shield her from the eyes that pursued them like lantern flames in the dark. The door to the small drawing room closed behind them with a muted thud, sealing them into a chamber lit only by the glow of a fire and the faint shimmer of moonlight seeping through frosted glass. Eleanor exhaled, and the tension in her shoulders eased by a fraction. He studied her carefully, the rise and fall of her breath, the determined lift of her chin, the exhaustion she tried so fiercely to disguise. "You need rest," he said quietly. She gave him a faint, humorless smile. "Rest is a luxury society rarely extends to women in my position." He flinched at the truth embedded in her tone. "Eleanor, I never wished this world to harm you." "You may not have wished it," she replied, "but that does not mean you prevented it." The honesty struck him harder than any accusation. He stepped nearer to the fire, gathering the courage to meet the shadows between them. She remained by the window, one hand braced against the sill, as though steadying herself against memories he had long tried to forget. "Tell me," he said at last, "what truly happened after you left?" Her fingers tightened on the sash of her gown. "Not yet." She reached into a small embroidered reticule and extracted a silver locket, delicate and gleaming with age. "First, I want you to see something." He recognized it instantly, his gift from years ago, offered on a summer afternoon when love had felt unquestionable and the world had not yet turned against them. "You kept it," he breathed. She opened it with slow, trembling care. Inside lay a faded sketch of her face, one he had drawn absent-mindedly while she read poetry beside him. Her younger self gazed up from the metal frame with soft eyes, unaware of the storms that would one day break her. "I carried it with me," she said, "through every place I fled to, even when I thought I should cast it away." Her voice wavered, but I could not. Emotion surged in him, gratitude, regret, longing tangled together. "Then why?" he asked softly. "Did you remain silent for so long?" Eleanor looked toward the window as rain began its soft descent, tapping gently against the glass. The sound filled the room like a muted heartbeat. "Silence," she said, "seemed kinder than the alternative." He moved closer, slowly, carefully, until the faint warmth of her presence brushed against him. "Tell me what you mean." Before she could answer, the door creaked open, and a sharp-faced baron stepped inside, clearly expecting the room to be empty. When he saw them, his eyebrows lifted with scandalous delight. "Your Grace," he drawled. Such intimacy behind closed doors. Should the mother of a mysterious child be conducting private meetings with her former husband? Eleanor stiffened as though struck. The Duke's voice turned cold. "You will leave. At once." But the Baron ignored him, eyes locked on Eleanor. "One wonders," he murmured, "whether her situation is as respectable as she pretends." Eleanor's breath faltered, humiliation blooming across her cheeks. The Duke crossed the room in 3 strides. "You will not speak another word." The steel in his tone froze the Baron where he stood. "Lady Eleanor is under my protection, and any man who dishonors her dishonors me." The Baron paled, muttered something unintelligible, and fled the room. Silence followed, dense, quivering. Eleanor's composure crumbled. She sank into a nearby chair, anguish flickering across her features. "This is why I feared returning," she whispered. "Every breath I take invites judgment." He knelt before her without hesitation, the act so instinctive it startled them both. His eyes searched hers, not demanding answers, but offering something gentler, permission to break. "They are wrong," he said. "All of them. You are not alone." Her eyes glistened. "You do not understand. Their words do not merely sting. They end women." "Then let me stand between you and their cruelty." "You already tried once," she said, voice trembling, "and it was not enough." Pain flickered across his features, but he did not retreat. "That failure has haunted me every day. I cannot rewrite the past, Eleanor, but I can fight for what remains." She studied him, her nails lightly grazing the locket's edge as though seeking steadiness. "Why now?" she asked. "Is it pity, guilt, or the scandal of a child that bears resemblance to you?" "It is none of those." He raised his hand, stopping short of touching hers. "It is you. It has always been you." Her breath caught, but she shook her head, unwilling to let emotions cloud her resolve. "Words are easy, Edward. Consequences are not." "Then give me a chance to prove them." She pressed a hand to her stomach, and her expression softened into something far more fragile. "I want my child to be welcomed into the world without shame, but I do not know if such a world exists." "It does," he said, "if I must build it myself." The fire crackled, its glow dancing across their faces. He could sense her wavering, not in weakness, but in the exhaustion of carrying a burden alone for too long. She lowered her gaze. "The truth of why I left," she whispered, "is not simple. It is not something I ever intended to share." "Share it now," he urged. "Whatever it is, I will bear it." She closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. The rain intensified, tapping harder against the panes, as though urging her onward. When she opened her eyes again, they held a quiet, devastating clarity. "Tonight," she said, "you will hear the truth that should have been spoken years ago." Her stare cut through the dimness, luminous with secrets long buried, and though she had not yet revealed a single detail, he felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the next breath she took would unravel everything he believed about their past. Then, barely above a whisper, she added, "But I must warn you, once you hear it, nothing between us will remain the same." Her confession lingered in the air, trembling, unfinished, yet powerful enough to still the fire itself. The Duke leaned closer, bracing himself for the revelation poised to break open the silence that had ruled their lives. And Eleanor drew one final, steadying breath. Silence held the drawing room as Eleanor steadied herself, her fingers lingering on the silver locket that still carried the faint warmth of his nearness. The Duke waited, every muscle taut with the dread of hearing how deeply he had failed her. Outside, rain traced trembling paths down the glass, echoing the tremor in her voice when she finally began to speak. She told him she had overheard a meeting between his advisors, men who spoke of lineage as if love meant nothing, and who insisted that she be set aside for a more advantageous match. She paused, steadying her breath, and explained how she had slipped into the hallway that night, drawn by the sound of her own name, carried in cold, clipped tones. The Duke remembered the meeting. He recalled the pressure, the relentless expectations of those who believed a duchess was nothing more than a vessel for legacy. But he had not known she had heard them. Eleanor described the moment she realized he had not defended her, not even with a single word, and how that silence cut deeper than any accusation spoken aloud. It was the moment her faith in their marriage began to fracture. Her voice faltered as she recounted how she left that night before dawn, carrying nothing but the locket and the remnants of a love she believed had already dissolved beneath the weight of duty. She expected heartbreak, yet instead felt a strange liberation, as though stepping away from the world that had never embraced her fully. But when she discovered she was with child, everything changed. Fear replaced her resolve, and she found herself hiding from the very future she once longed for, terrified that returning would expose her child to the same merciless scrutiny. Every path seemed perilous, every decision threaded with risk. Edward listened in stricken silence, each syllable tightening the coil of guilt within him. He tried to speak, but she held up a trembling hand, urging him to let her finish. She said she had tried to send a letter, but fear stayed her pen each time. She convinced herself he would not want the complication of her return. The advisers' voices haunted her memory, twisting her every attempt at courage. She wandered through distant towns, seeking anonymity, yet found no peace. Everywhere she went, the child inside her reminded her of the life she had abandoned. Loneliness shadowed her steps like an ever-present companion. Edward rose slowly, as though fearing any sudden movement might shatter the fragile truth suspended between them. He admitted he had been a coward, swayed by expectations he should have defied, blinded by the fear of disappointing a lineage obsessed with reputation. He told her he had searched for her after she vanished, driven not by duty, but by a despair he had never confessed. Yet every inquiry met silence. Every lead dissolved into nothing. Each failed attempt hardened his belief that she had left of her own choosing, that she no longer desired a place by his side. He had been wrong in every possible way. Eleanor's eyes softened, though hurt still lingered beneath her composure. She confessed that she had feared his disappointment more than the judgment of strangers, for his approval had once been the anchor of her spirit. The child had become both shield and burden, a constant reminder of a love she had tried to silence. Edward stepped closer, his voice low as he vowed that whatever storms awaited, he would face them with her. Yet she hesitated, wary of believing promises spoken within sheltered rooms when the world outside burned with cruelty. She needed proof, not poetry, and proof required facing the very enemies who once broke her. Before she could speak again, raised voices echoed from the hallway. Edward's sister, Lady Charlotte, confronted a pair of nobles who had been lurking outside the door, their expressions stretched with malicious curiosity. Charlotte's sharp rebuke cut through the corridor, her words defending Eleanor with an authority that forced the eavesdroppers to retreat. Eleanor listened, astonished, for Charlotte had once remained distant during the marriage, uncertain how to navigate the fragile tension between brother and bride. Now, her fierce protection felt like an unexpected balm, a reminder that not every ally had been lost. Eleanor felt a flicker of gratitude she had not anticipated. Edward returned to Eleanor's side, his expression a blend of resolve and unspoken fear. He told her that whatever truth she revealed next, he wished to hear it not as a duke shackled by duty, but as the man who once cherished every breath she took. She looked at him long enough to see that vulnerability had finally eroded his former pride. Then she admitted the final piece of her secret. She had not intended to return at all. She had planned to raise the child alone, far from courts and titles, until fate forced her hand. Her voice trembled as she revealed the reason she could not stay away. She withdrew a folded letter from her reticule, its edges softened by travel and time. It bore the seal of a physician who had tended to her in a distant coastal town. She handed it to Edward, her fingers brushing his with hesitant trust. He unfolded it, eyes narrowing as he read the delicate script. It confirmed that the child she carried was undeniably his, conceived shortly before their separation. But more than that, it warned of complications that would require stability, protection, and access to care she could not obtain alone. The truth stunned him. He felt the weight of responsibility settle upon him like armor. He lifted his gaze, finding Eleanor watching him with a courage so fragile it threatened to break him. She whispered that she had returned not to plead for acceptance, but to secure a future for their child. Edward reached for her hand at last, and she did not pull away. "There's more," she said tonight.